The word chicken, printed on the front of a package, is no longer a description. It is a legally constructed marketing term. The truth is, the protein sitting inside your refrigerator right now, the centerpiece of your family's dinner, is likely the end product of a deeply compromised, hyper-industrialized system that relies heavily on chemical baths, saline injections, and systemic genetic manipulation. We conducted an exhaustive audit of 11 major poultry brands dominating the shelves of America's largest grocery chains, including Walmart, Costco, Target, and Trader Joe's. The results were deeply unsettling. 7 of these household names failed spectacularly. Only 4 proved to be worth your money. The most alarming revelation was not the presence of hidden bacteria or the specter of unannounced recalls. The true danger lies in what manufacturers are legally permitted to conceal behind vague, comforting labels. No laws were broken. The system was simply designed to prioritize corporate margins over basic biological integrity. You walk into the grocery store looking for clean, healthy protein. Instead, you are confronted with a barrage of meaningless marketing buzzwords like farm fresh and natural, completely blinding you to the reality of what you are actually purchasing. To navigate this deception, you must understand 4 critical industry terms: air-chilled, water-chilled, woody breast, and saline injection. Once you comprehend exactly what these terms mean, your entire perspective on the poultry aisle will permanently shift. We are going to dismantle the 7 worst offenders on the market and then reveal the 4 exceptional brands that have actually earned a place on your dinner table. Sitting at number 7 on the list of offenders is Great Value, the generic powerhouse of the Walmart empire. When you walk into any Walmart location, that bright blue bag immediately catches your eye. The price tag is incredibly seductive, usually hovering under $3 a pound. The financial logic seems undeniable, so you place it in your cart and head home. But when you finally open the packaging and examine the meat under your kitchen lights, the illusion collapses. The breast fillet appears pale, almost sickly translucent, marred by stark parallel white lines running forcefully through the muscle tissue. Those lines are not normal fat marbling. They are the undeniable physical manifestation of a condition called white striping. This is a legitimate muscle myopathy, a severe documented tissue damage pattern. Peer-reviewed research confirms that white striping is now the absolute norm within the commercial broiler industry. Scientists from Cornell University and the University of Bologna have published data revealing that the vast majority of skinless breast fillets sold in the United States display this exact scarring. In more severe cases, you will encounter a condition known as woody breast, where the muscle feels unnaturally hard and bulges outward because the internal fibers have literally torn and scarred over. These birds have been genetically engineered to grow at such an accelerated, unnatural rate that their muscle mass aggressively outpaces their own blood supply, causing the tissue to destroy itself from the inside out. Great Value promised you an affordable family meal. What they delivered was a genetically compromised bird, bred purely for rapid feed conversion, with visible tissue damage permanently baked into the muscle. Before we proceed, you need to understand a simple, practical protocol to protect yourself at the grocery store. First, always inspect the breast fillet for those parallel white striations. If you see them, put the package down. Second, if the meat feels uncharacteristically firm or rock hard to the touch, walk away. Third, read the fine print on the ingredient panel. If the word solution appears anywhere on that label, it means the bird was submerged in a massive communal water bath before it was packaged. The vast majority of store brands utilize this exact processing method, but they will never advertise it on the front of the packaging. The strategy is clear. Ignore the bright logos, bypass the impossibly low prices, and critically examine the actual protein. Number 6 brings us to the undeniable behemoth of the industry, Tyson. Tyson is not just a brand name. It is the supplier behind the chicken nuggets in your child's school cafeteria and the rotisserie bird on your holiday table. They are responsible for roughly 20% of all chicken sold in the United States. They command immense trust, yet they are one of the most egregious offenders on this list. The primary issue with Tyson is their reliance on the chiller tank. Immediately after slaughter, the bird is dumped into a massive communal water bath alongside thousands of other carcasses. They tumble together, absorbing water and soaking in a harsh chlorine or peroxide solution designed to strip away the heavy bacterial load coating their skin. As a direct result of this bath, the bird emerges significantly heavier than when it entered. The USDA legally permits this added, chemically treated water to be calculated into the final net weight of the product, meaning you are literally paying chicken prices for tap water. In 1997, the European Union completely banned this specific chilling practice. Their decision was not based on the trace amounts of chlorine being inherently toxic, but rather on the conclusion that the chemical bath was being used as a massive, structural band-aid to mask horrific systemic sanitation failures throughout the farming process. If a bird requires a chlorine bath to be considered safe for human consumption, the entire life cycle of that animal, from the barn to the slaughterhouse, is fundamentally flawed. Despite this damning European rejection remaining firmly in place, Tyson continues to utilize the chiller tank, shipping tens of millions of pounds of waterlogged poultry to American consumers every single week. Furthermore, Tyson carries a deeply troubled legal history. In 2020, the Department of Justice Antitrust Division explicitly outlined how major players in the poultry industry engaged in massive, illegal conspiracies to fix prices and rig bids on broiler chickens sold to restaurants, grocery chains, and even vulnerable school lunch programs. Tyson was fully aware of this behavior and ultimately agreed to pay massive settlements to resolve the resulting lawsuits. You believed you were buying from the most trusted name in American poultry. Instead, you purchased a product rejected by European regulators, processed in a communal chemical bath, and backed by a corporation with a documented history of price fixing. At number 5, we find Perdue, a brand that has mastered the art of psychological marketing. Perdue has invested heavily in cultivating a brand identity centered around comforting, reassuring phrases like "no antibiotics ever," "humanely raised," and "vegetarian fed." When you scan the refrigerated aisle, their packaging instinctively reads as the safer, more ethical option. The anti-Tyson, it looks like the responsible choice. However, you must flip the package over and confront the fine print. The animal welfare claims, plastered across the front, are technically accurate, but only in the same vague, heavily manipulated way that a political promise is technically accurate. Independent welfare researchers have documented the stark reality inside many of Perdue's standard barns. The birds are afforded roughly 0.7 square feet of space per animal at their full mature body weight. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the surface area of a single sheet of printer paper for a living creature weighing over 6 pounds. Unsurprisingly, Perdue has faced multiple class action lawsuits specifically challenging the deceptive nature of their humanely raised marketing, with plaintiffs correctly arguing that the idyllic advertising completely outruns the grim reality of their industrial farming practices. While most of these lawsuits have been settled out of court, the comforting wording on the front of the packaging remains completely unchanged. The most critical detail, however, is often entirely overlooked by consumers. Perdue utilizes the exact same communal chiller tank processing method as Tyson. The bird goes through the same chemical water bath, absorbs the same added weight, and forces you to pay for that absorbed water at a premium price. Perdue promised you a superior ethical farm story, but ultimately delivered a product that endured the exact same industrial processing as the cheapest generic brands on the market. Number 4 introduces Foster Farms, a massive California-based producer that absolutely dominates the West Coast market. If you live anywhere between San Diego and Seattle, it is highly probable that you have consumed Foster Farms chicken recently. They are a heritage brand, but they are also the company responsible for one of the most severe food poisoning events in modern American history. In 2013, the CDC traced a massive, multi-state outbreak of Salmonella Heidelberg directly back to Foster Farms products. The investigation ultimately confirmed 634 devastating cases spread across 29 different states, with the specific bacterial strain demonstrating terrifying resistance to multiple first-line antibiotics. The company's response to the crisis was agonizingly slow, and the recall was only partial. The situation escalated to the point where Costco was forced to completely pull Foster Farms rotisserie chickens from their shelves after USDA testing positively identified the dangerous outbreak strain on intact products directly inside the manufacturing plant. The structural issues within the company remain deeply concerning. In 2022, Foster Farms was acquired by a private equity firm in a massive multi-billion-dollar transaction that removed the company from the public markets and drastically restructured its debt obligations. While the familiar brand name remains on the packaging, the underlying capital structure is now driven entirely by private equity margins rather than public accountability. Recent reports from independent animal welfare organizations have explicitly flagged Foster Farms as possessing one of the most alarming gaps between their wholesome front-of-package marketing claims and their actual barn-level agricultural practices. You were sold the comforting image of a family-run, heritage brand. You received a private equity-controlled asset with a terrifying history of antibiotic-resistant outbreaks and a widening animal welfare deficit. Number 3 operates entirely in the shadows. Pilgrim's Pride. You will likely never see their name printed on a package in your local grocery store, and that invisibility is precisely the danger. Pilgrim's Pride is a massive business-to-business behemoth, supplying raw product directly to supermarkets, fast food conglomerates, and national food service distributors under various private labels. You have undoubtedly eaten their chicken, and you have almost certainly fed it to your children. You simply never knew it. In 2020, the dark reality of their operations was dragged into the light when Pilgrim's Pride formally pleaded guilty in federal court to participating in a massive, illegal conspiracy to fix prices and rig bids for broiler chickens. The Department of Justice Antitrust Division levied a criminal fine of roughly $17 million against the company. This revelation should horrify every parent, as the DOJ filings explicitly implicated school lunch contracts in the price-fixing scheme. Your local underfunded school district was forced to bid against other districts for the exact same chicken, completely unaware that Pilgrim's Pride and their co-conspirators had already illegally agreed on the inflated bids in advance. Furthermore, Pilgrim's Pride is majority-owned by JBS, the colossal Brazilian meat conglomerate with its own extensive, highly publicized history of multi-billion-dollar corruption settlements and relentless battles with regulators over horrific worker conditions. Pilgrim's Pride promised you nothing, hiding behind the anonymity of private labels, while quietly rigging the price of your child's school lunch and pleading guilty to federal antitrust crimes. Number 2. Targets a beloved grocery store staple, the famous Costco and Kroger rotisserie chickens. This reality is particularly painful to confront because the rotisserie chicken is universally viewed as the ultimate culinary cheat code, a fast, cheap, incredibly convenient dinner solution. Costco's rotisserie bird is so deeply ingrained in their corporate identity that they have publicly stated they will gladly lose money on the $4.99 price tag forever, simply to drive foot traffic into their warehouses. But you must read the actual ingredient panel printed on the packaging. It lists whole chicken, water, salt, sodium phosphates, hydrolyzed carrageenan, modified cornstarch, sugar, dextrose chicken broth, and isolated soy protein. That is not simply a roasted chicken. That is a chemically engineered recipe injected directly into the bird before it ever reaches the rotisserie spit. This intense, industrial saline injection is the exact reason the meat pulls so effortlessly from the bone and the skin appears so impossibly uniform. It is not culinary craft, it is sodium phosphate aggressively pulling artificial moisture deep into the muscle tissue and trapping it there. Unsurprisingly, the deceptive labeling of the Costco rotisserie chicken has triggered class action litigation, with plaintiffs arguing that the company aggressively markets the bird as being free of preservatives, while simultaneously injecting it with complex chemical compounds that function exactly like preservatives. While the underlying meat itself is not inherently dangerous, the core issue is the massive unrequested chemical cocktail and the deceptive pricing structure. When you pay for a 3-pound bird, a significant percentage of that weight is nothing more than injected chemical solution. You believed you were purchasing the simplest, cleanest dinner on the market. You actually bought a 12-ingredient, hyper-processed injection cocktail wrapped in a deceptive pricing promise. Taking the number 1 spot as the absolute worst offender on the market is Wayne Sanderson Farms. This corporation has historically operated as the loudest, most aggressive public defender of the archaic, antibiotic-dependent factory farming model. While their competitors were quietly retreating from antibiotic claims to compete with the rising demand for organic products, Wayne Sanderson took out massive, full-page advertisements in industry trade publications, explicitly telling the public that heavy antibiotic use in poultry was perfectly acceptable, and that activists were entirely wrong. They proudly doubled down on an outdated, dangerous agricultural model. Then, the legal hammer fell in 2022 with the devastating Cargill-Sanderson consent decree. The U.S. Department of Justice announced a massive settlement regarding horrific systemic worker pay suppression and deeply exploitative chicken grower contracting practices. The proposed settlement demanded an astonishing $85 million in worker restitution, forced the imposition of a court-appointed antitrust monitor, and legally barred the companies from utilizing specific, exploitative tactics designed to suppress the wages of the farmers raising their birds. Immediately following this massive legal defeat, Wayne Farms and Sanderson Farms executed a massive merger, instantly creating one of the 3 largest, most powerful poultry producers in the entire United States. Their corporate identity was forged in defending archaic, dangerous farming practices, and their massive new corporate structure simply amplified that toxic culture. They promised you an unapologetic defense of traditional farming. They delivered an $85 million federal consent decree, a relentless campaign against transparency, and the active suppression of the very farmers tasked with raising your food. Before we pivot to the brands that actually deserve your trust, you need to understand how to execute a fast, practical quality control test in your own kitchen tonight. First, perform the skin test. Remove a single breast fillet from the packaging, lay it flat, and run your thumb firmly across the surface. If the muscle yields easily and leaves a slight indentation, the tissue structure is intact. If the fillet feels completely rock hard, resembling dense foam board, you are dealing with woody breast. If you observe those parallel white striations, you are looking at white striping. Next, execute the cook test. Place a dry pan over medium heat and lay the fillet down without any oil. If the chicken immediately begins to aggressively steam and leak massive pools of visible water within the first 60 seconds, the bird absorbed that liquid at the processing plant. A genuine, high-quality, air-chilled bird will sweat very lightly and then quickly begin to sear. A water-chilled, chemically bloated bird will literally boil in its own absorbed bathwater before it ever has a chance to brown. Finally, execute the label scan. Look for 4 specific keywords. If the word solution appears, the bird was water-chilled. If sodium phosphate appears, the bird was aggressively injection enhanced. If the word natural appears without the backing of a rigorous third-party certifier, completely ignore it as empty marketing. However, if the phrase air-chilled appears alongside a legitimate USDA process-verified program seal, you are looking at a real, verifiable claim. Now, let us examine the 4 exceptional brands that successfully passed every metric of this exhaustive audit. First is Smart Chicken Organic. This is a family-run operation based in Nebraska that holds a strict USDA organic certification. Their defining quality is their processing method. Every single bird is individually air-chilled. This means they are cooled using frigid air, completely bypassing the disgusting communal chemical water baths used by the mega corporations. There is zero added artificial water artificially inflating the net weight. Their packaging features a pristine single-ingredient label, chicken. Second is Mary's Free Range. This company represents 4 generations of dedicated family farming. Their agricultural model is entirely distinct. The birds live in specialized mobile coops that are physically moved to fresh pasture every single day. The chickens receive a constantly rotating diet of fresh forage, while the fields benefit from natural, sustainable fertilization. The resulting meat displays deep, authentic color variation. The fat is noticeably yellower, and if you simmer the bones, the resulting broth is a rich, vibrant gold. This is not a marketing gimmick. It is the undeniable cellular evidence of true pasture-raised agriculture. Third is Bell & Evans, a fiercely independent family-owned company operating since 1894. They boast a single-ingredient label and utilize strict air-chilling protocols. Crucially, their facility employs a highly advanced, controlled atmosphere stunning system, which they have publicly and transparently detailed to consumers. Bell & Evans operates as the gold standard that other farmers desperately attempt to emulate, and they have spent over a decade, loudly and publicly, criticizing the horrific chiller tank standards utilized by their massive corporate competitors. This is the exact brand your local independent butcher has likely been quietly sourcing for years. Finally, Pasturebird. This company operates on a true, rigorous rotational grazing model backed by USDA process-verified mobile shelters that are moved daily. Unlike the massive corporations that hide their agricultural practices behind vague marketing copy, Pasturebird proudly publishes their exact stocking density, the precise square footage afforded to every single bird. They provide the hard numbers because their exceptional numbers are their greatest argument for quality and animal welfare. Those 4 brands passed the test. The other 7 failed spectacularly. You now possess the ultimate receipt of the modern poultry industry. You understand precisely why the chicken in your refrigerator was submerged in a chemical bath for 30 minutes before packaging. You know exactly why a generic Tyson breast looks pale and damaged, while a Bell & Evans fillet is dark, tight, and healthy. You know that Pilgrim's Pride illegally rigged the price of your child's school lunch and pleaded guilty in federal court. You understand the horrific chemical cocktail injected into the Costco rotisserie bird, and you know the terrifying history of the Foster Farm salmonella outbreak. You are fully aware of the DOJ settlements surrounding Wayne Sanderson, and you understand the massive deceptive gap between Perdue's marketing claims and their actual farming practices. You know exactly how to identify white striping and woody breast, and you know exactly what an air-chilled bird looks like when it hits a hot pan. You are armed with the knowledge of exactly what needs to be thrown out before dinner tonight.